Good evening. I'm Katab Rollins, and among other duties at NJPAC, I am the producer of our social justice film and panel series. Today's panel discussion, Why Should We Vote, is presented as part of the PSEG True Diversity Film Series, and we will use source material from the PBS Town Hall special entitled, Why Don't We Vote? In a few minutes, our dynamic panel will lead a conversation about the real, true, and tangible need for us to vote, and the myriad reasons why some folks choose not to exercise that right. As we begin our program, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded land of the Lenape peoples. I ask that you join me in acknowledging the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We must also acknowledge that the grounds NJPAC stands upon were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the voices of many indigenous and oppressed people. We acknowledge that the teaching of U.S. history, in schools, cultural institutions, and the media have left out many voices and difficult truths in idealized nationalistic identity. We acknowledge the struggles of oppressed peoples, those actively and behind the scenes working to make our country honor its guiding principles of equality, liberty, and justice for all. We acknowledge and honor that Black Lives Matter. This acknowledgement demonstrates our commitment as a community working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of colonialism, oppression, and systemic racism. The purpose of this series that we're doing is to bring our community together and to encourage everyone to take part in the movement to ensure civil rights for all. NJPAC has launched a series of events and initiatives focused on promoting racial equality. On these pages, you can find resources that will help you take action in the voting booth and elsewhere, and join us for conversations and discussions that can help you understand the issues that we're all grappling with. So join us at njpac.org/take-a-stand to learn more, do more, and help our nation achieve the more perfect union it always promised. Before I introduce our moderator of the evening, please welcome Calvin Ledford Jr., the newly appointed president of the PSEG Foundation, which is a sponsor of this series. Welcome, Calvin.
Well, thank you, Katab, and welcome everyone to the New Jersey Performing Arts Center True Diversity Series. What a subject matter, why we should vote. I am Calvin Ledford, president of the PSEG Foundation, as well as director of corporate social responsibility. And we're a proud partner of the New Jersey Performing Arts Center True Diversity Series and these key subject matters like we're going to be speaking about this evening and hearing from the esteemed panel. The PSEG Foundation focuses its philanthropy on thriving communities, STEM education, safety, diversity, and inclusion. And all of that is embedded in some of the discussion that will be taking place this evening. You know, we're living in a new norm today. 2020 has been a complex and difficult year. And with that, I'm so proud to announce that PSEG has undertaken a $1 million initiative to support powering equity and social justice over the next 2 years. We will be working with those organizations that foster equity and work towards social justice to improve our communities. I look forward to hearing from this esteemed panel and this lively discussion as we talk about why we should vote, the right to vote, the action to vote. It's that one action where everyone can show their leadership, demonstrate decision-making, be responsible and accountable. It's the right thing to do. Everyone should exercise their right to vote. And with that, Katab, I'll turn it back over to you and have a great panel discussion. All panelists, thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. We appreciate you. And now, the main event. I turn over the program to our Madame Moderator, Ms. Joyce Wilson Harley, the former mayor of South Orange and the creator of Operation Big Vote, which harnesses the power of Black women's organizations to elect Black women to public office nationwide. Welcome, Joyce.
Thank you so much, Kitab, and thank you so much to NJPAC and PSEG for sponsoring this discussion that is so necessary in this very, very challenging and changing time. I am delighted to have such wonderful panelists to work with this evening, and I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order. I can't believe how lucky we are to have Roberto Frugoni, president of the Frugoni Group, on our panel. He's an organization that trains local leaders on strategies to influence policy. Welcome, Roberto. We also have with us the dynamic Toni Hendricks, principal partner of the Hendricks Group, and she is also the Community Outreach and Civic Engagement Chair for the NAACP of the New Brunswick branch, in New Brunswick branches and area. She has a long history of work in the voter education and voter registration space, and we couldn't have chosen a better person to work with us on this Why We Must Vote panel. And then we have Linda Lloyd, former South Ward of Newark district leader, and it was a candidate for municipal council in Newark. She registered in her capacity of thousands of voters through a program that she initiated that was very successful called her Newark Voter Empowerment Tour. So we're delighted to have you with us, Linda, and welcome to you too. And last, but by no means least, we have Ron Rice Jr., who is the Senior Director for Government Relations with the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools and a former member of the Newark Municipal Council, who left a track record of success in legislation that made Newark the economic and social engine that it is today. So welcome, welcome, welcome to our panelists. And we're going to start, we're talking about why we must vote, but we think it's real important for people to understand a little bit of the historical significance of voting for us. And there is a quote that was on the screen from John Lewis. And as you know, he was the bridge that got us across from being voter suppressed and voter left out to actual voter participation. I'd like to show you just a little bit of that graphic that shows John Lewis being the bridge that brought us across. And we pay homage to him. We are working very hard to make sure that the Voting Rights Act that he worked so hard on for his entire life gets enacted. But I just thought we would be remiss if we didn't in some way show graphically what a bridge he has been to all of us. So as we talk about why we must vote, I'd like to share with you the reaction we've gotten to from some people who think their vote doesn't count, they're not sure it makes a difference. And although we are completely nonpartisan, we're not advocating for any particular party or any particular candidate, the next graphic that will show you is a clear and convincing demonstration of what happens when people don't vote. And if you look at the slide that's going to come up next, just look at what happened in states around the nation. And I'll just pick a few that are battleground states and that are being hotly contested now. Wisconsin. In 2016, President Donald Trump won Wisconsin by only 23,000 votes. And yet 93,000 registered Black voters in Milwaukee alone didn't show up. Imagine the outcome if just a fraction of them had showed up. Look at Pennsylvania, which is really a very big battleground state. He only won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes. And yet 238,000 registered Black voters were missing in action. And Florida, numbers are shocking there, 113,000 votes won Florida, but 379,000 registered Black voters didn't come to the polls where they could have and would have made a huge difference. And the difference they would have made is in the Electoral College votes. And if you take a look at what you're going to see next about why the Electoral College determined the election, remember, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. She just didn't win it in the states that had large Electoral College votes. Look at California, 55, New York, 29, Texas, 38, Florida. It just goes on and on and on. And it's important to note that you only need 270 Electoral College votes to win the election. President Donald Trump had 304. Hillary Clinton had 227. And imagine what would have happened if she'd been able to garner the votes from Florida, the votes from Pennsylvania. It would have been a completely different election. So please understand fully and unequivocally, your vote counts. And that's why we're asking you to come out and make sure that you're registered and come out to vote. And so when we look at the why we must vote, it's important to understand what it is that we're voting for. The ballots are already out. Most people have received their ballots by now. And if you look at it, you will see that in this unusual vote by mail election, there is every single level of government on your ballot. There's the federal, there's the state with the public questions. There are your local with your county officials who are up for re-election or election, as well as your municipal and school board elections. Every ballot for every municipality in every county is different, because in some counties and some municipalities you have school board elections as well as local elections. And so what you're voting for is important. And we often talk about down ballot votes. And I think it's important to take a look at what I consider the up ballot, the ones that are most important and most likely to affect your life directly and immediately are your local, your municipal elections, your county elections, your state elections, and then your federal. So I'm going to ask our distinguished panelists, Ron Rice and Linda Lloyd, to address what's at stake at the local level. Why is the local level important? So Ron, would you start off with that question, please?
Certainly. First, it's an honor to be here with everyone, and I appreciate the opportunity. So local election voting is the most important voting because it's the form of government that is closest to the people. It is the form of government that actually talks about and deals with issues of taxes and deals with whether your potholes get filled and whether your children have a good education or not. And it is usually the elections that get the least amount of participation. When people think about politics and government, they think about the president, the senator, the congressman. They don't think about their school board member. They don't think about their city council person. For instance, but some people also don't know what they actually do. So I used to be a municipal council person in the city of Newark, and we did three things. We struck a budget every year, which determines your tax rate. We wrote legislation, and we had oversight of the administration. Those three things are part of what the Faulkner Act, the enabling statute for our form of government, allows us to do. But I do understand why some people question why people don't vote. And I think it's because there's a disconnect between the duties and expectations of local elected officials. And so when we say we're fighting for better housing, there's a disconnect that sometimes people say, well, I voted for you, I don't have better housing. And so part of that is because local government is empowered to do some things really well, but other things it's not. In some instances, local government has to partner with state government, has to partner with private industry in order to get things done. And so I get why people are not voting, but the reality is that you have to continue to vote for those levels of government that are most responsive to your most immediate needs on every single day and every single instance of your daily life.
So I'm sure that you will confirm that all politics is local. Linda, as a person who registered thousands of voters in your city, talk to us a little bit about municipal government and its importance to everybody, especially when they look at those ballots and they see municipal elections on the ballot.
So I want to start by thanking NJPAC and for this opportunity to be on this panel with these esteemed panelists. And I'm smiling because I literally was going to say, as the mayor said, you know, all politics are local. But for me, I want to take it a step further, and not just what we see on a ballot, but what we don't see on a ballot. So what the mayor has the ability to do and the council has the ability to do is to appoint and affirm people to serve on boards and commissions in our municipalities and in our cities. And a lot of these boards and commissions make decisions about what could be built where can you have a restaurant, where can you have a school. The mayor also appoints judges. So when we talk about the criminal justice system, or even something as simple as tickets in a municipality and how that operates, like your mayor appoints who the judges are in a particular town or municipality. And so while yes, what the councilman said is very important, how your roads get fixed or not, when your garbage gets picked up or not, the quality of housing, the partnership with that. But also and actually I reached out to the councilman a couple years ago to have a conversation about the boards and commissions that exist specifically in the city of Newark, and how they don't necessarily represent the demographic of people who reside in the city, and some of the things that we wanted to do to organize to change that. So yes, we should pay attention to people who are on the ballot, because not only do we want them to represent our values like we mentioned before, but we want to make sure that they are appointing people to serve in positions that have direct impact on our quality of life as well.
Indeed, there is a great deal of power at the local municipal level. And if we look at our ballots, we'll see that we have county elected officials on the ballot. So Roberto, spend a few minutes talking to us about why those elections are so important and their impact on people's lives.
Thank you. And thank you to NJPAC and the PSEG Foundation for this opportunity. As Linda said, you know, there's a lot of boards and commissions that are there. There's an opportunity to affect. Well, the county has them as well. For example, community colleges in each of the counties, board members get appointed by county freeholders, or as they will in the future be named, county commissioners. So the word freeholder in the title, which they have now, will soon be changed to county commissioner, which is really important. And I'll add this one point that one of the reasons why voting is important is because that change from freeholder to county commissioner, it wasn't by mistake. It wasn't something that people said, oh, this name sounds better. It was the fact that freeholder had a specific connotation. There's only certain people that at the time could vote, could have a voice, and now everybody has a voice. So everybody voting makes a difference, including at the county level, and what the county does, whether it's take care of parks, whether it's help create more efficiencies between municipalities. For a lot of county governments, part of their work is helping different municipalities work together to buy in bulk so that it brings the cost of those goods down. As someone, you know, we all pay taxes. Right? We all don't like paying a tremendous amount of taxes. Well, this is an opportunity for your tax dollars to be more efficiently used, and that's through the county helping out local municipalities.
Thank you so much, and thank you for reminding us that they will no longer be called freeholders because of its negative historical significance, and they'll be commissioners, although people will see on their ballots the word freeholder. So thank you for reminding us of that. And then we turn to the state, because there are 3 public questions that are on the ballot that are affected by the state government. So Tony, can you talk a little bit about state government and why that is an important level of government that people should pay attention to and what they do?
Yes, Joyce, thank you. And hello to my family at NJPAC. I truly admire the men and women of NJPAC. I've worked with them closely over the past 20-some years, and you are the best. So thank you for inviting me and for PSEG to sponsor this event, and to my esteemed panelists. Hello, everyone out there. Good evening. So first and foremost, I want to encourage everyone to actually vote yay or nay, yes or no, for the 3 public questions. One of the problems that we have in this state is that people don't vote for the public questions. They don't universally do so. As a poll worker, I see people rush into behind the curtain and rush back right back out. So I know they're not sitting there and going through the whole ballot. So please go through the whole ballot. Now let's get to the 3 questions that are on the ballot for everyone in the state of New Jersey this year. The first one is legalizing marijuana. And I believe many people have been waiting patiently to see whether or not this state was going to join several of the others in our country who have chosen to legalize the use of cannabis in this state by people other than those who have a medical prescription. So this is your opportunity now to change the Constitution of New Jersey so that the Constitution of New Jersey will make it legal for you to purchase recreational cannabis and have it in your possession. This is a personal decision for you. There's a very good interpretive statement. A couple of things to keep in mind about this particular question is that the management of the sale of marijuana is going to be held tightly, just as it is now for medical marijuana. I know that many of our civil rights partners, including ourselves, the NAACP, are very concerned about the awarding of licenses to those who will be in the position to actually sell marijuana. And in this state, as in many states, people of color have been disproportionately placed into the prison system because of the use of marijuana. We're saying now that those individuals should have their records expunged immediately and that they should be considered not to be cut out of the marijuana industry going forward. There's a lot of things to consider here, but please make sure you vote and take into consideration that it is not, you can't just go down the street and purchase it at your local supermarket, which some people are thinking. So let's move on to the ballot question number 2. This one is about extending a $250 tax credit to veterans who served in the military but not during wartime. So it would be a $250 tax credit to the veterans themselves, and then that tax credit would be passed to their legal spouse if they predeceased them. The issue here is, again, it's personal. What you should know is that the impact of always, whenever we give a tax break, is on the coffers of the state government. But this is one that you would take into consideration. We're already doing it for veterans who served during wartime. So this would be veterans who served during peacetime. Now, ballot question number 3. I encourage you to really read this ballot question and thoroughly acquaint yourself with the ramifications of it. It has to do with redistricting, drawing the lines around our state in terms of how the areas of our states will be organized into districts. We are all assigned now, when you get your ballot, you see you're assigned to a district. Gerrymandering is a complex situation that we can't handle right now in this panel discussion. It would take up the whole time. But one of the problems with redistricting is that if it's not done well, it can actually isolate communities and cut them off from having the power of the ballot. So you could draw a district that could, if you did it in like a square box, it would be a powerful constituent body of, let's say, the Black community. But if you slice and dice it in like a snake type of a look, then you're dispersing the power of that community and you're spreading it around. So redistricting it's very complex. And this ballot question is tied to the census and the fact that the census data will potentially be delayed in coming to our state. and they're asking us to use the existing census data, which we know is flawed data because it does not represent the diversity in this state as it exists today. So there are other ways of handling getting the census information late. We can change the date of our primary and several other means. If we vote yes on this, then we are changing our constitution that any time census data is delayed, we delay accurately drawing districts according to the diverse populations in this state. So I want to end it there because this could take up our whole panel, and I'm not trying to do that. But vote for the 3 questions.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you for really clarifying what these 3 public questions are and what they mean. So we've talked about the different levels of government, the what we're voting for. And so I want to turn, because this is a great segue, Tony, that you've given us for each one of the panelists to give us one what's at stake, if you will, why this vote at this election at this time is so important. We know that those 3 questions can change the constitution of our state. But Roberto, will you talk about one particular issue that is at stake, one particular issue that will be resolved or addressed by how many people and whether or not people come out to vote?
Well, I think there's many, but 2 of the ones that I like to focus on the most, and I think especially within the Latino community, I know immigration is a huge issue and a topic that we can cover almost the whole hour. But for example, jobs, right? The priority within our budgets to help small businesses, to help employers be able to keep employees on payroll, and also health insurance. I was always taught, right, and this is popular, that a municipality is a state's budget, is a statement of their values, right? Is it a value to make sure that everybody has health insurance, that everybody stays healthy? And so those decisions are made at levels that are beyond individuals. And so the only way to make sure that those values line up with voters, with individuals, with the community, is by voting in the people that share those values with us. So again, healthcare, which is really important, and jobs through businesses.
Absolutely, and you can see a lot of the frenzy about trying to eliminate the Affordable Care Act or to change it. And you see what's happened with this pandemic with respect to the number of jobs that have been lost. So when you vote somebody that votes your values, and I love that phrase that you used, Roberto, you're absolutely voting for the best thing for you, yourself, and your family. So I'll turn to you, Linda. What's an issue that this election and this vote has at stake? Did we lose Linda?
No, you didn't lose me.
Oh,
I was muted. I want to echo the issue about healthcare. Again, nonpartisan, but it took the previous president, Obama, a lot to get the Affordable Healthcare passed. And 2 big things with the Affordable Care Act was pre-existing conditions, as well as you being able to stay on your parents' insurance. I think it's up until the age of 26.
Correct.
And I don't know if anybody, the people who are paying for insurance is just not cheap. And so when you're graduating from college or you're high school and you're new in the world and you're trying to figure out, where you're going to work and what you're going to do, having the ability to stay on your parents' insurance for longer is a huge, huge help, even when you're just getting your first footing in your first couple of jobs. And so that has the potential to be changed drastically, or it was definitely a target for the current president. And we want to make sure that we protect that as much as possible. The other thing is not necessarily federal, but just given what's happening in our country right now, we really want to pay attention to what's happening on a local level. So for those of us who have local elections happening in November, again, your mayor appoints the person who had the police department, and your city council members, they have to confirm that person. And when issues arrive locally, it doesn't shoot down rather to Washington, D.C. It shoots to wherever your city hall is. And so I just want to make sure that people really not only just pay attention to the president, but pay attention who we're electing for our school boards, which is critically important. Pay attention who we're electing for county committee, which we call district leader. Pay attention to who we are electing on a state level. A lot of people don't know what our state senators and our state legislators do. So I know that's a little bit beyond what you asked, but a lot of focus is on the presidential election, which is important. But who our congressperson is, who our senators are, they definitely work hand in hand.
Very well said, and a good reminder that every level of government is important, and that where you're most likely to be impacted immediately is at the local level. So, Ron, what is something that's at stake that is in this ballot that people need to pay attention to and come out and vote for?
I think ultimately it's a national concern, but it's something that impacts locally, as Linda mentioned, and that is police reform. As a city councilman who was on the front lines of trying to get the Attorney General's office to investigate police brutality in the city of Newark amongst the Newark Police Department that had gone on for decades, really unaddressed, I call it the Newark's original sin. It's very important that in lieu of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and a number of incidences that have happened for far too long, but particularly in 2020, a national dialogue has to not only begin, but legislation at that level needs to be passed, and states and local government and county governments need to act in suit. And so the difference in voting is simple. And President Obama put together a 21st century task force to reform policing, that it contains many of the things that our activists in the streets are calling for, over 6 years ago. I have a copy of it. And it asks for some of the reforms that we know are needed. But when administrations change and priorities differ because of voting, those kind of things get put to the back and tragedies continue to happen in our communities. And so who you vote for at the national level, who you vote for at the state level will determine what kind of policing requirements are there, what kind of oversight occurs, and what kind of penalties ensue for those officers and those departments that don't care and don't move policing into the 21st century. And so voting is impactful. While it may not be a direct line of something to vote for, it's not an initiative, it may not be a question on your ballot, trust me, police reform in the 21st century is very much on the ballot at the federal level, at the state level, and definitely at the local level.
And it's on the ballot every day in every single way. And that is such an important issue that is roiling this country now. So you're spot on in pointing that out as an issue. When we'll say to someone, what's at stake? Police reform, police accountability, definitely at stake in this election at every level. And Tony, you went through the public policy questions. Is there any other issue that is so important that you see it as an answer to the question of what's at stake in this election?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring it back to the federal level, and bring it back to the power of the pen. Many people think that a lot of new policy new laws were put into place during the last almost 4 years, when actually there were a lot of executive orders that were written. We have to realize that when we put our trust in the person who's going to be leading this country, that they do have some power, unilateral power, to make changes to how, the way we govern ourselves each and every day, and that's through a set of executive orders. So we really need to understand that this back and forth in terms of looking at everything that could be of issue to you, whether it's fair housing, whether it's education, whether it's the environment, whether it's criminal justice system, that there are ways for the person who sits in the highest seat of our government to, by signing an executive order, change what happens in our lives during their tenure. So 2016 election, my branch president, Bruce Morgan, said, folks, it's about the Supreme Court. Folks, it's about the Supreme Court. Now I'm going to say to you, and I'm not as smart as Bruce is, but I'm going to say to you, folks, it's about the United States Senate. And we really have to go back to our civics lessons and understand the power that's invested in the United States Senate and how that power is used and has been used as it relates to some of the things that might be near and dear to you. Now, if it's used in a way that you're happy with, fine. I'm not speaking out against that. But the power that rests with the Senate is so great in terms of what happens to the laws of this land that we really need to understand what it means to have an imbalance of power in the Senate right now, where they can literally shut down any bills from being brought forward. They can determine who's going to sit in the Supreme Court, as well as the circuit courts, where there are hundreds and hundreds of positions in the circuit court. And by the way, it goes to the circuit court before it can even get to the Supreme Court. There's a lot at stake here. So while in 2016, it was about the Supreme Court, we saw what happened. In 2020, it's about the United States Senate.
Joyce, if I can.
Sure.
If I can add just a comment, only because you're going to hear a lot of, this is the most important election you can vote in, and it's true. Last year's election was the most important when it came, and that's true. The year before, and that's true. And next year, that's going to be true as well. We need to get away from thinking that one election, by electing one person, it's going to solve all of our problems. They won't. There's gradual progress that's made. And so every election then becomes important towards getting to the goal. Every election gets us one vote closer, one person closer, one policy, one bill closer to getting to the ideal. So it's important not just to think that we vote once and everything's done, but create a culture where we're all voting, where we're encouraging our family, our neighbors, everybody in our community to vote, to get involved, to be part of the community, not just living in it, but being truly part of it.
Truer words were never spoken. The culture of voting, I love that phrase, and I think we've got to make that our mantra, to create a culture of voting in our communities, because it's always incremental, step by step, election by election, elected official by elected official, that we reach the goal of true liberty and justice for all in our nation, in our state, and in our community. So great to have that reminder, a culture of voting. That's what we desperately need. So we've talked about the what of voting. We know the levels of government that are in this particular election. We know some of the issues and some of the important things that are at stake. So now let's talk about how we vote. Everybody has gotten their ballot. Everybody has gotten questions about, how am I going to do this? How do I make sure my vote gets counted? What do I need to know or do to make sure I do this correctly? So I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give our audience and the people that are listening and participating one good tip on what they can do with that ballot to make sure that the ballot gets counted. And I'm going to start with you, Ron. What's the one thing that you want to tell people that they must do to make sure that their ballot gets counted?
So I always assume people are sometimes as nervous as I am when it comes to mailing in their ballots, right? So I have something that's very simple, and if you can do it, it might help alleviate some of your stress. I would make a copy of it, and I would practice filling it out before I went to the actual ballot. Now, it's important to note that once you're done with that copy, that you ball it up and then you throw it away. But this election is important, but as Roberto said, they're all important. And the culture of voting should be we've never been in a pandemic before, at least since 1918. So the reality is that most people are used to voting in person. This can be a scary thing for people. It's a first time thing for a lot of folks. And so to take that out, something as simple as making a quick copy of it, filling it out first, make a mistake or two on it, and then even copying it over if you filled it out perfectly will alleviate some of that stress. And so while it's not a traditional thing that people may ask and may say you should do, it's something I think is actually beneficial and actually a little bit fun that you can do it even with your kids in the house to make sure that you get it right, that you feel a sense of relief once it's actually done, and then you can mail it off.
That's certainly, if you're doing it with your children, that certainly helps create that culture of voting that we want to see happen. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right about the stress that people are under, wanting to vote, wanting to make sure their vote gets counted. So the idea of practicing is such a good one, and it's something that I hope people will take seriously. So that's a good tip for everybody. All right, Tony, give us a tip. What is something that people need to know about and need to do to make sure their vote gets counted?
Sign the authorization form. So your signature in this state is your proof that you are who you are as a registered voter. For those of you who come to the polls normally, you know that the poll worker will not ask you for your identification. And there's a very rare occasion where they would, and that's usually just because there's some kind of a housekeeping issue that they've been alerted to. So your signature is your authorization to vote. One of the top 3 reasons every voting cycle that paper ballots are rejected are because of a lack of signature. Now, I do want to say in this state, a very important step was taken by the governor. Once it was brought to his attention by several organizations such as the League of Women Voters, the Institute for Social Justice, the NAACP, and a gentleman with Parkinson. And it was, wait a minute. The gentleman with Parkinson said, my signature changes from moment to moment, day to day. So if you're trying to verify my signature against my signature on file, that's not going to work. And we also understood that in the past, if your signature was missing or they felt it was an inaccurate signature, you didn't know it. Your ballot was just discarded. So this year, for the first time, there is a cure process, and it started with the primary, that if it is determined that your signature is not a match for the signature on file, you will be contacted by the Board of Elections. And they will try you by all methods that they have available for you. If they have your phone number, if they have your email address, last resort would be sending you a letter. But they have to notify you and give you the opportunity to cure your signature or answer questions about that. So that's a very positive thing. But sign your authorization.
That's absolutely a good tip. And to add to what Tony's just said, the Board of Elections, your Superintendent of Elections staff, they have to let you know if your ballot has been deemed defective. They have to let you know within 24 hours. They have to reach out to you to make sure that you have the opportunity to cure. And they give you a certain number of days to get back to them and to cure any defect in your ballot. So we shouldn't have the number of ballots disqualified this election that we've had in the past. And I think we all owe a round of applause to the Institute for Social Justice, the NAACP, and the ACLU, and the League of Women Voters for bringing the disqualification by signature to the governor's attention, and to him for acting very swiftly to remedy what was a real flaw for us. So Linda, what's your tip after having registered thousands of voters? What's your tip for people to make sure that they know that their ballot can be counted?
I just want to quickly echo what Ms. Tony and you said about how important what the governor did, because so many people's votes were not counted and they didn't know. And it was taking a little while to kind of track votes. So I'll share, I think later in the presentation, an app where you can kind of check your registration status and things of that nature. But we were a little slow to the party with getting people's, to be able to verify whether someone's vote was counted or not. So I think that that's something huge that should not just kind of be breezed past. Just two quick things that seem very simple, but is extremely important, can have your ballot not be counted. One is the color of ink that you use. You want to make sure that you're not using red. You don't use a pencil, that you use blue or black. And then there's a space on your ballot where it looks like you should detach it, but it literally says right before the line, please do not detach. So please do not detach, because if you do that and you mail in your ballot, unfortunately, it's not going to be counted. Like I said, something simple, but if overlooked, definitely could cause your ballot to not be counted.
Thank you for raising that, Linda, because that was one of the top 3 reasons ballots were thrown out. People saw the perforation and the natural inclination. If something's perforated, you tear it off. A lot of people, unfortunately, thought that tearing it off and holding on to the certificate was their receipt that their vote was going to be counted. So thank you for reminding people, please do not detach. And also, the color of ink is so important as well. Look at your ballot very carefully to see if they tell you what color of ink you must use. Some counties you can use blue, black, or pencil because they've got the latest equipment. Others do not, and they say only use black ink. So please read it really carefully. And we're going to circle back to you, Roberto. What's your one tip for voters to make sure that their vote and their ballot gets processed and gets counted?
I think you almost took my thunder a bit, because my instruction is to read everything. Read all of the instructions, make sure to read it through. We understand now from this discussion, from everything we hear, how important our vote is. Well, our vote gets counted based on our ballot. And so it deserves the time and attention that the power of our vote and our voice is. And so take a moment, read it. I know we're all busy. Sometimes we all know who we're going to vote for, and we want to just get it done with and move on. Take a moment, sit down, look at the ballot, read the instructions, follow through till the end, and make sure your vote gets counted.
That was a great, great summary of everything that everybody said, because everything that was said goes right back to read the ballot, read the instructions, even making copies and practicing on it, making sure you understand that you must sign and sign in the places where you're asked to sign, and don't tear that certificate off. If people read the instructions, they'll know exactly what ink to use on their ballot for their county, and their votes will be counted. So this has been very instructive. I hope that people have found it instructive. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at the next slide that we have. That it's a graphic that shows you how to actually turn your ballot in. It lists the ways that you can do it. And if you can put that up, you'll see it, okay? This gives you good information about where to register to vote and how to learn to complete the ballot. So Tony, do you kind of want to walk us through this particular slide?
Yes, Tanisha Wade, our Secretary of State, has put up a 2020 election portal. If you go to vote.nj.gov, which is listed here, you'll be able to access the portal. The portal will allow you to do all of the things that are listed here. It also has a very excellent video showing you step by step how to complete the ballot. There you'll be able to find out your distribution points. But I want to mention 2 things here very quickly. What you should do initially when you go to the portal is you should verify, if you have not received your ballot, you must verify if you are registered to vote, because there are several different ways for a voter to be inactive. And if you are an inactive voter and you don't know it and you sit there waiting for your ballot, you're going to be waiting for a very, very long time. So one of the first things you do when you get to the portal is make sure, go in and say, am I registered to vote? 2 or 3 quick questions. Then the next thing I would like for you to do is to fill out the track your ballot process. And this is a way for you to track the receipt of your ballot and whether or not it's been processed. You can actually go back and view how what has happened, how you voted, and if you voted for several years. So those are 2 very, very important issues. And I'll bring a quick example that Ms. Joyce asked me to bring regarding this. This past Saturday, we were doing a voter registration drive, and a very wonderful woman about my age, and that's of a particular age, I said to her, you're registered to vote, right? She said, absolutely, I vote every year. I said, well, did you get your ballot? She says, no. I said, you didn't get your ballot yet? She says, no. I said, come here. We put her on the vote.nj.gov. We looked her up and we found out she was inactive. The reason she was inactive is because she forgot to change her address. And it showed that she had, the last time she had been registered to vote, it was a completely different city, a completely different county. And because she had not responded to the mail that was coming to her home from the Board of Elections, and then she missed the voting cycle at her other address, she was listed as inactive. So she would have never received her paper ballot. She was very grateful, and she sat right down and filled out her voter registration form. So when you're making your plan, if you have not received your ballot yet, that's the first thing you want to do. If you've received it, the next thing you want to do is go in and sign up to have your ballot tracked.
And look at all the things that this portal offers you, how to register. You can register to vote. And the deadline for registering, of course, is October 13th. So it's fast approaching. You can also track your ballot. You can also learn how to complete your ballot. So what you see there will reinforce what we're telling you here. And you can find your polling place. And if you've got questions, you better believe there are other people that have the same question. The frequently asked questions will be answered for you. So this is a wonderful tool that our Secretary of State has created and put forth for us. The next slide I'm going to ask that we show addresses the issue of people who are very, very concerned about the United States Postal Service. And Ron, you're in Washington and you've got your ear to the mic. Tell us what you're hearing and why people are becoming so agitated about having mistrust for the United States Postal Service.
Well, there's a willful dissonance going on in the country about the validity of mail-in voting, and it's a misnomer. It's not true, but people are afraid that if I vote by mail, will my vote actually be counted? And as I mentioned earlier, since 1918 pandemic, we've never had the need to vote in mass by mail-in in a lot of ways. The Bipartisan Policy Center puts out a lot of arguments. I'm only going to talk about really quickly, just to mention 3 ways that actually mail-in voting is probably even more secure than actually voting in public, in person. One is that with mail-in voting, states actually update the mail-in address regularly, which actually reduces fraud, right? And so if someone is actually checking regularly about your address as part of their system checks, it means that it's actually better to do that and safer and more secure to do that than actually voting in public. The second thing is there are more steps in verification of mail-in ballots. And so voter registrations are checked and updated daily, right, as a result of this particular process in many states. Many states send out mailers to see if a person has moved, as Tony mentioned before, so they would check that kind of process. And in a lot of ways, the mail ballot drop-off boxes are staffed and watched on a regular basis as well. And the last thing I would say is, and it's been sort of said before, there are a lot of ballot curing opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily have if you voted in person. And so you have a right in many states, some statutorily given, some in the Constitution, to have your ballot cured have opportunities to cure your ballot if there are inequities. If you vote in public, in person, you vote, you walk out, and that's pretty much it. There are a lot of other opportunities going forward. And so I would submit that the evidence shows historically that while there may be anecdotal evidence of voter fraud in very small places, usually really under like 0.009% of the cases, the argument for voter suppression over centuries is a lot more prevalent and a lot more real and a lot more what's going on in the country today than anything about voter fraud.
And it's interesting because our postal workers who have, through this pandemic, have soldiered on no matter what, are very hurt by the notion that people think that they will not do their job. So I really appreciate you highlighting and underscoring how safe it is to vote by mail. But as you can see from this slide, if that doesn't move you, there are other ways you can vote. There are the secure ballot boxes that are in every county. They're more than ever secure ballot boxes. They're bolted to the ground. They're under 24-hour surveillance. They are cleaned out and picked up. Those ballots are picked up by the folks who work for your superintendent of elections every single day and sometimes twice a day. You can also, as you know, you can go right to your superintendent of elections office and turn your ballot in, hand your ballot in that way if you have a notion to do so. And then last, you can also on election day go to the polling place and turn your ballot in to someone working at the polling place. You have to know exactly where your polling place is. You can turn your ballot in, but you can only turn your own ballot in on election day. So there are myriad number of ways in which you can cast your vote, but there is no reason to fear that somehow, some way, our dedicated postal workers will just fall down on the job. It's simply not true. So we've gone through what we're voting for, why we're voting, and how to vote. So I want to ask each of our panelists a question. We are here on this panel because we are committed to voting. It's part of our lifeblood. We know that because we've talked to each other and we've seen the actions and the activities that each of us have undertaken. So I'm going to ask each of you to tell us why you vote, why voting is so important to you. So Linda, why do you vote?
Well, I vote because I want power. I want power for my community. I want power and I want respect for my community. I want people to know that they just can't come into my community and make any law that they want to make without knowing the implications of what it's going to mean for myself, my son, and my other family members and other members in my community. And I think I would be remiss by saying, if I did not say, not only is voting a way to have power in our community, but we have to build economic power. And so in politics, it's money and people, but the money, in my opinion, needs to be generated by us. And so this may be an unpopular opinion, but I feel like, especially as a Black woman, I need to say that no matter who is in office, I definitely think you should vote. Don't sit out any elections. We talked about how elections are important on every level, but we have to begin to build economic power. If we only vote in every election and we don't build economically, we are not building holistic communities and holistic, powerful communities. So I just want to make sure that I share that we need to vote, that we need to not only vote, but stay engaged, and we need to build economic power in our community.
Okay, and the two go hand in hand, so there's nothing unpopular about marrying them together in this presentation. Ron, why do you vote?
So I'm a student of history, and there are three things that historically power and oppressive forces in America have tried to keep away from Black people. One is our ability to learn to read. The second thing was our consideration as a full man or woman. We were 3/5 of a human being. And the third thing historically has been our right to vote. And so anything that the power structure that has historically kept certain folks oppressed wants to keep away from me, I want. And the reality is that voting is a tool. I agree. It ain't the only tool, but like every tool belt has a screwdriver and other instruments, every tool belt has to have a hammer. And voting is our hammer. You don't get to economic justice without voting. You don't get to certain other things in your community without voting. And again, if that were not true, we would not see the millions of dollars being spent every day trying to suppress and keep the vote away from certain people and giving it to others. If it wasn't valuable, they wouldn't waste their time. And so as Linda said, I want power. The power is in the ballot. Malcolm X said it. It's the ballot or the bullet. I choose the ballot to make the change that I think we need for our communities.
Okay, and I know that you could not have the last name of Rice and not be absolutely committed to voting in every election.
If I didn't want a belt across my backside, you are correct.
Talk about a culture of voting. You grew up in that culture. And Roberto, why do you vote?
Well, I have two principles that are my North Star, right? One is that I know deeply that one person can make a difference. One phone call to a voter, getting them to vote is going to make a difference. One vote on the Supreme Court will make a difference. One vote in the Senate makes a difference. So we have that power. Every individual has the power to make a difference. I've been fortunate to work with and know a lot of community members who have taken that next step to run for office and made a difference in their community. There are great people out there. Not all politics is corrupt. Politics does dictate the laws that are passed. So it's a necessary thing. A lot of people say necessary evil. Other people say necessary good. It's a fact of life. So it's important that everybody understand that one person can make a difference. And the second one is to piggyback off of Ron, is the sense of history, right? So many people have prevented all of us from being able to vote. Not to be too much of a history nerd, but at a time back in history when founding fathers were saying, to England, no, everybody's created equal, but actually that wasn't true, right? Now we do have the power to make a difference. Now our voice does count. So as a student of history, it's important for us to recognize the progress that's been made and take advantage of that to create a stronger future. But we only do that by voting, by getting involved, by being involved in our communities. Those are the two things.
Thank you for those two things. And I think that, they say those who forget their history are destined to repeat it. So it's important that we know our history and know how hard it was, how hard fought the right to vote came to us. I'll share just one little quick piece about why I'm so passionate about what I do with Operation Big Vote and voting. And that is when I was younger, a child, my grandfather was a Baptist minister in Georgia, big supporter of Dr. King. And I saw him put his life on the line so that we could register, so that we could be able to vote when he marched from Selma to Montgomery. And not only did he put his life on the line, but he told a particular reporter, he said, I'm willing to put my grandchildren's life on the line. That's how important the right to vote is. And if you've ever seen your grandfather or someone you love, someone that's close to you, hosed and beaten because they want the right to vote, it inculcates in you that that is an important right to have. And so that's where the culture of voting grew up in me and my brothers and our families, because we saw how our grandfather was endangered and put his life on the line so that we would have the right to vote. And Tony, tell us why you vote.
So I came of age during the 60s, and I'll put aside the civil rights movement that one would traditionally think of and talk about the other part of the 60s that Dr. King was very actively engaged in, and that was his opposition to the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War was very personal to me and to my family. My older brother was drafted. He graduated from high school, sent immediately off to 8 weeks of basic training and 4 weeks of advanced infantry training, and then found himself in the jungles of Vietnam and had never really left home in Westchester County in New York. So it was a very difficult and challenging time for our family, because at the time, my brother was the head of household. And what we didn't know, because we didn't understand how politics works, how those in power can cause things to happen for you that are good or bad, worked. I actually went to school on the political system and realized that by petitioning to my local government, and then all the way up to then Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in the state of New York, that my brother should have never been sent to Vietnam. So I went to school on the politics during that period of time, and I started immediately to put it to work, and I became a door knocker. I would go out with the petition for candidates and knock on doors, and I did telephone banks, and my brother was pretty severely injured, so it was really important for me for the legacy of him and all of the men and women who have fought in the wars and who fought in the civil rights wars, to say if it was good enough for them to lay their lives on the line for us, the least we can do is vote.
The very least we can do is vote. And these personal statements about why we vote, I hope and I'm convinced they will resonate with the people that we talk to, the people that we're talking to now, as we go about the business of making sure that people have the right to vote, and not only have that right, but they exercise that right as well. And if there was anything that underscored better, I'm going to ask 2 slides to be posted that speak, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, that speak volumes about why it's so important that we vote. And the first one speaks to how people who gets elected and why. Bad officials are elected by good citizens who do not vote. And nobody could have said it better. It's the absolute truth that's how bad officials get elected, is when good citizens do not vote and don't exercise their right to vote. And this is a graphic that was posted today that I want to share with you because it's very, very powerful. And it shows, if you look at right there in front of the White House, lawn signs that have the names of people who were murdered, and I'll use the word, and I don't use the word lightly, murdered by police officers who have never been brought to justice. And you heard about police reform at the state, local, and federal levels. Imagine if people had voted and voted their interests years ago, these people and hundreds of others would still be alive. Your vote is your voice, and we urge you with every fiber of our being, every single panelist on this webinar, we urge you to exercise that right in this election and every election that comes after it. I see that we have a number of questions that have been put out by our audience. And so I'm going to see if I can't grab some of those questions and ask the panelists to answer them. I'm looking in the chat and I'm seeing people are thanking us. 29 days until election. Here's a question. It says, they found this very helpful, excellent discussion. Thank us. Can you speak about the Attorney General's auditing on-site checking of this mail vote? In prior elections, the Attorney General dispatched staff to validate procedures at polling places. What is being done with this vote? Does anybody particular want to take this, with the Attorney General being sent out to watch what's going on in polling places? I know that right now, I know that as the ballots are being counted, they're being live streamed. So if you go to the website that the Secretary of State has put up, you'll be able to go to each county and see what each county is doing to live stream, to make sure, and just to observe what's happening as ballots are being opened and counting. I don't know that the Attorney General is dispatching folks out at the polling places. I know it happened in the past when there was concern about violence and those kinds of things, but I don't get that sense that that is going on right now. So I'm going to look and see if does anybody else have anything to add to that?
Well, there is the normal process of the parties, the Democratic Party, Republican Party, of posting challengers at the polling location. So that continues to be a tool that's used very effectively. And challengers are trained and they are part of the process at the polling locations. But I can't speak for what the Attorney General is planning to do.
Yeah, I don't know of any, and I do election. Who wants to address that?
I'm sorry, Joyce, this is Ron.
Yes, please.
The only thing I would add to Tony's statement is that there are various candidates who do run, who do call out to the Attorney General to monitor elections. They have some pretty basic evidence that there might be something amiss or something fraudulent that may occur as a precautionary call. I've never seen an Attorney General actually come in and actually sort of bogart local practices or challengers, but I have seen various candidates. I've worked with several candidates who've asked the Attorney General to be mindful of what they think may be an election where they think some practices that are not above board may be administered by certain other people. But it depends, and I think there's some very specific things that have to be specific accusations that have to be made in order for the Attorney General to even consider that particular request.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to my knowledge, statewide, I've not heard of any of those kinds of accusations anywhere in New Jersey that has invited the Attorney General to come in. Each candidate will have their own challengers and the party will have challengers, but I'm unaware in this election of anything like that occurring. We had another question where we were thanked for the panel, but this person is concerned about we're in the COVID era. And they're concerned that, people may be afraid to come out to vote, and they're asking, are there going to be extra or additional reminders to people to get them to come out and vote? Anybody have heard of any additional mailings going out other than, civic groups asking people to come out and vote? There's a lot of phone banking going on, but I'm not aware of any concerted effort by the Secretary of State or the governor or any of your county officials to do an additional thrust to get people to come out to vote. Have you heard anything like that, Linda or Tony or Roberto or Ron?
I haven't heard anything specifically, but I think this is an opportunity for us to take personal accountability and be involved civically. So, we can own our household, own our families, own our blocks. Like we can be the leaders of that. The Newark 72 Collective, I didn't get a chance to speak about that group, which I'm one of the founding members, where under 72% of the voting population in the city of Newark is under 45 years old. And so we basically take it upon ourselves to call everybody in our phone, knock on doors prior to COVID, and engage people to let them know, not only to remind them to vote, but let them know why they should vote and talk to them about issues that are specific to them. So I don't know that we need elected officials to do that. I think we can just rely on ourselves to it's part of our civic responsibility, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And that's happening with the sororities, the fraternities, the League of Women Voters, all of the civic groups, the NAACP, all of the civic groups are, I know, pushing people to come out and vote. Does anybody else have an answer?
Yeah, I have one. Yes. So historically, we've seen that candidates, it's almost like a game. Candidates are concerned with getting 50% plus one, right? So being able to raise money in order to get 50% plus one, generally parties reach out to voters, to people that have already voted a few times. And so that's why a lot of times our communities are left out, are not reminded, whether by candidates, whether by parties or by anyone, to come out to vote, to register to vote when they're eligible. So it's important for us to change that cycle, to break that cycle and tell our neighbors how important it is to vote, why it makes a difference, to tell our family to tell our community to make sure that we take it upon ourselves, our responsibility to get the ball rolling and getting people to vote. And then once they voted a few times, parties will see it, candidates will see it, and it'll perpetually get better. But it doesn't start unless we change that cycle and start creating that culture that we spoke about of voting in our community.
That's right. I was going to reiterate what you said, the culture
Yes.
of voting. It's up to us.
And if I might, Ms. Joyce, the Rutgers University, it would be remiss of me not to call out Rutgers University for mounting very aggressive voter registration, voter education drives on many levels. As a matter of fact, Thursday, I was invited to speak on a panel that one of the groups at Rutgers University, and there are many of those going on. So I know Rutgers is engaging their students, and we have a branch on campus that has been actively, and I do mean actively, mano to mano, registering other students to vote and speaking out to the younger community. So that is taking place. But again, not through the auspices of the government, but through the organizations that you've pointed out before.
Okay, and we've questioned about what are we going to do? How are we going to get young people out to vote? And you've talked about what's happening at Rutgers. Does anybody have any idea? Because that's the question of how are we pushing the vote among those students, young people starting at the age of 18? What do we know about what's going on to capture and captivate them?
So if I may, so I'm really excited. So I work with and was one of the founding members of the Latino Action Network. And I know on Thursday, we're hosting a training for youth, for Latino youth, to be able to understand how they can make a difference. It's Thursday from 4 to 6. It's on my Twitter, all of the details to register. But everyone from 16 up can make a difference. While you can't vote at 16 or 17, you can make a call to others to vote. If you're not a citizen, if you're not able to register to vote, you can still call people to remind them when elections are happening, remind them to vote, remind them how important it is. And a lot of times they become your voice, right? By pushing others, by pushing people that are eligible to vote, eligible to register, and then to vote, you're raising the voice of people who are not able to vote. So it's important that we all get involved.
We have to be the change that we want to see, right? Exactly. And there was a question that is in the question and answer section about the marijuana legislation. And they're asking to explain exactly how it's going to work if the public votes yes to legalize marijuana for recreational use. So Tony, you led us kind of through that. Can you give us the next steps? They're saying what happens? What does the legislature have to do?
Well, the legislature punted when they could have made it law, and they said we're going to put it in the hands of our citizens. So that's why it's on the ballot now as a constitutional question. So if it's a yes, then you'll see immediately that there will be steps put into place to increase licensing of those who are interested in being a seller, a legal seller. They will have to have their tax stamps and become a legal business, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll use the basic rules around the current medical marijuana structure that's been put into place in order to start to roll out how the recreational use would work. That's what we know so far. I mean, I don't consider myself an authority on it, but in watching it, that's what it's looking like. But it won't go back to the legislature for a vote once it's voted on November 3rd.
Okay, because that was part of the question. Who
Joyce,
else had a response to that?
If I could speak to that as
Sure,
an example of not just voting and walking away, but staying engaged. When and if it passes in November, we definitely need to make sure that, I know the NAACP historically has been doing this, we have been doing this as well, but making sure that we're pushing for the expungement of people who have those type of charges on their record dealing with marijuana now that it become legal. That's something that we really need to pay attention to, because then you'll have a situation where people are now can open up legal businesses for it, while other people who may have charges from it in the past can't get a basic job. So voting is not just, again, going to the ballot box, voting yes or no, but you have to stay engaged in a process in order to maintain your power in that regard.
And there's a lot of movement around encouraging people to vote no on this particular public question until such time as people who are sitting in jail, serving a long sentence because they were within so many feet of a school or a park, who are sitting in jail while now we're going to legalize it so that people who are doing the exact same thing they did don't have the consequences. And I've seen a lot of push from different organizations, civic organizations, civil rights organizations, who are saying, why would we vote yes on this unless there has a companion expungement piece of legislation to support it, and even releasing people who are sitting in jail because they did years ago what we're making legal now. So that is an important thing for people to take into consideration. We have another question that's come up. We've identified the various ways that you can cast your ballot, turn your ballot in, and they're asking us to tell them what we each believe is the best way to make sure that you turn your ballot in and it gets counted. So Ron, since you really came up in defense of the Postal Service, I want to start with you. This is the question from the viewer. What is the best way that you recommend that I cast my ballot in this election? So I'll start with you, Ron.
There's some at the highest levels of national government who don't trust our USPS. I happen to do so. And so I say the best way to do it is to mail it and trust the institution that you pay for to fund through your taxpayer dollars. And that's the U.S. Postal Service. The reality is that it is the best postal service in the world. There is no other industrialized nation that has a postal service the way the United States does. It always gets the job done. But if you are a little worried, then there are lots of ballot boxes that you can go to put your ballot in that are secure, that will be picked up. I don't know where they are in New Jersey, but I understand that there are going to be a lot more available because of this election, because of where we find ourselves in. But I trust the Postal Service, but I also believe that you can do the drop off as well, because they're also secure. As I mentioned before, and I won't restate it, the Bipartisan Policy Center and every expert will tell you that mailing your ballot in is more secure because of a lot of different ways than actually even voting in person in many places. Okay.
What do you say, Roberto?
I think there is a secret to this, right? Actually, the best way to vote, right? The best way to vote is whatever way is most convenient for you, right? So whether you're sending it in by mail, send it in by mail. If you want to drop it off at one of the secure drop boxes, drop it off. If you want to personally take it to your polling place on election day, so be it. But the most important thing is for you to vote. But how you vote, there's several ways. In New Jersey, we're blessed to have several ways to be able to do so, to make it convenient, especially during this pandemic. So let's take advantage of that and vote.
Okay, so vote the way that's most convenient for you. What do you say, Tony?
Vote early, vote early, and sign up to track your ballot to make sure that it's received.
Okay, Linda, if you had to choose from the many ways to vote, what do you think, what would you recommend is the best way to do so?
I echo exactly what Roberto said. You have many different ways to exercise your right to vote. The most important thing is that you just do it. So whichever one makes you feel comfortable. If you are concerned about COVID, then don't go to the polling place, put it in the mail. However you choose to vote, you'll be able to track your vote. I know we're running out of time, but you can use the website that Ms. Tony provided. You can also download the app on your Play Store or Google or Apple, wherever you are, and you can download the New Jersey Elections app. You can track your vote that way. You also can call your local Board of Elections for whatever county that you live in. I happen to live in the county of Essex, so I would call my board of elections to track my vote to see if it was received and processed. But whatever makes you feel comfortable, as long as you're voting, is most important. Thank you.
Very good.
So that's the app that he put up on the screen.
Perfect. Great advice. Vote whatever way you're most comfortable voting, but you can trust the United States Postal Service. And with respect to where those secure ballot boxes are, if you go to the website that the Secretary of State has created, there will be a list by county of where your secure ballot boxes are. And as I said, they are bolted to cement. They are designed so that people can't reach their hand in there to take anything out. They're under 24-hour surveillance, and they are cleaned out, ballots picked up at least once a day, and in most locations, twice a day. So that is where you'll find the information about where your ballot boxes are. I certainly want to, again, thank NJPAC and PSEG, but most importantly, I want to thank the panelists, because I think you all did a bang-up, wonderful job of addressing why we must vote. And I would just, anybody have any closing statement you'd like to make? I would be happy to hear from you, and I'll just start again in alphabetical order of how we were introduced to find out what you want to say. Roberto, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share?
First, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you to NJPAC, to PSEG, to everybody that's attending today and listening in online, and really has a passion for making sure that we create change in this country. And the way we do it is by being involved civically. And I do want to plug that if you haven't completed your census yet, please do so. And then if you haven't voted yet and you have your ballot, vote, right? Let's make sure we're all getting involved. Let's make sure we're all part of the change, like you said, that we want to see in the world. So this is our opportunity. Thanks again for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Tony?
To the voters out there who have a network that you can influence, reach out to that network, regardless of where they are, and tell them why you're voting, just like you've asked us to tell you why. Help them find their purpose. Help them overcome the reasons why they don't believe that it's an important thing for them to do. I can only help the people that I can influence. So I need all of you to do the same thing, and it'll be like a ripple effect. And then we're going to get above that less than 60% of people, registered people in this country who are voting. That's abysmal. So find your purpose, tell your network, let's get this done.
All right. Linda, closing remarks from you? Sorry,
I was muted.
Mm-hmm.
I was muted and my camera fell. So perfect timing. Good thing this didn't happen during the beginning of the session. Can you hear me well, Ms. Joyce?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you again to NJPAC for the opportunity. Thank you again to the panelists for some of the advice you shared. I now know some partners that I want to work with in civic engagement going forward. But I just want to echo what I said earlier. It's not just about us voting, but it's about us voting and staying engaged. And it's about us building economic power in our community. Voting gives us power, but if we don't build and sustain economies in our community, we're not having a holistic approach. And so for the young people who are under the age of 45, who think that their vote does not count or their vote does not matter, we really push and drive elections, whether or not you know it. And so men lie, women lie, numbers don't. We have the numbers to push any election, and we need to use our numbers as our power to make sure that we get what it is that we want in our communities.
Hear, hear. Ron?
So I have a laundry list of elections in American history that have been decided by one vote. A laundry list.
Yes.
Your vote matters and it counts. But to Linda's point, it really is your admission ticket to being a civic, responsible citizen in this great nation we call a republic. And if you think that there are issues and problems here that haven't been solved, then you owe it not just to the people who died and risked it all to give you that franchise, but you owe it to the future generations not yet born to take every tool that you have at your disposal. You may not have the most money in the world, you may not have the best education, but the one thing that unites us all as citizens is that we all have an equal franchise. We all have one voice to add to make our country better. Take what you have, get into the game, and continue to be a civic participant. It's what you are. It's what you owe your nation. It's what you owe your family. It's what you owe your people. To take the franchise you have as your admission ticket, and then to go beyond that. It's just the beginning. Your vote gets you in the game, but then continue afterwards, to Linda's point, and be the fullest, most active participant you can in your nation, in your democracy, and in your community.
Spot on. Thank you. And I hope that you will share that list of elections historically that have been won by one vote. I saw something in Atlantic magazine, they listed a couple, but that is so important for people to know that one vote really does matter. And my only closing statement is our vote is our voice. Let's make sure that we use it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Kitab, and thank you again, NJPAC, PSEG, and these magnificent panelists who brought it all home for us. Kitab?
I thank you. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Roberto. I'm sorry. And thank you, Ronald. The wisdom, the information, the resources that you all shared are priceless. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate your infinite wisdom on behalf of NJPAC and the audience who attended. Also, thank you to PSEG, to ADP, and to Bank of America, our sponsors of this series as well. And to the audience, after listening to all these voices, these wise voices, I urge you to take a stand. You can visit njpac.org/take-a-stand for more resources that will lead you to action. And the resources that were mentioned in today's conversation will live on that landing page, njpac.org/take-a-stand. My closing remarks are register to vote and then vote on November 3rd. Complete the census. You have until October 31st if you haven't done so already. And then follow us on social media to stay abreast of all of NJPAC's current offerings. Have a great night. And, come back next month for our next event as part of this series. On November 16th, it will be called Policing the Police, where we're gonna have an important and intense conversation about public safety with law enforcement, with legal experts, and with some other people. So November 16th is our next event as part of the series. Thanks again and have a wonderful night. Thanks to everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.